Alrighty, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to make a bit of a video about how to find data for your research claim. So at this stage you should have watched the video about how to come up with a research question, or that process that you can use to come up with a research question. What we're going to talk about today is how do you actually go and find the right data for that research question. So you should be at the point where you've chosen a claim, you've got a bit of an idea about a research question, but you haven't committed to a specific research question because you don't know if you have the data or you can find the data to match that specific question. So today we're not talking about doing any sort of background research to get an idea about the topic. What we're actually doing is how we're going to find the right data for the right question. Now, again, you need to remember that you need to be flexible. So if you can't find the data you've got for your particular question that you're aiming for, you may need to readjust your question, or you may need to keep looking for data. Again, when you're looking for that data, you may actually find a really good data set that doesn't match your question. So you could still use that data set. You just need to change your question a little bit to match that data. Now, when we're talking about data, we're talking about looking for tables, looking for graphs, looking for graphics, looking for numbers, and that kind of thing. What I would say to you is that I'd recommend that you try and find data that is quantitative data in a graph or in a table, rather than sort of statistics or one-out numbers. Okay, so let's talk about doing some Google searches here. So when you're doing your Google searches, you don't need to go and ask Google a question. Okay, we're just looking for keywords. So if I was looking for fossil fuels, biofuels, and CO2 emissions, I don't need to go in and ask Google, okay, what are the CO2 emissions from fossil fuels and biofuels? I just need to put in the key terms. And so you can see straight away, oh look, I've got some data come up here. But what most people will do is if they go and they click on the very first link that comes up in Google, and you might get lucky and you might find some data. So this one has data, and it's a Wikipedia article, so you could actually go in there and have a look at the Wikipedia article and try and find the source that this data came from. But we just kind of got lucky. Say for example, if you find a link and you click on your first link, there could be a hell of a lot of information in here, and if I started reading this and I was reading it from start to finish, it is a very inefficient way to do your data collection, or you're looking for data. So if I scan through this, I can look for data, and I'm scanning through and there's no obvious data in here. Okay, and with your data, like I was saying before, you're mainly trying to look for graphs and tables and things like that. There's nothing in here there's no data in here. Now, if this was a really big document and I was looking for something in particular in there, say biodiesel, a really good trick here is Control F, and it will bring up a find box, and I can go, okay, well, biodiesel, okay, and there's nothing in here about biodiesel. So if I was interested in biodiesel, there's nothing in there about biodiesel. There's no point me reading all of this, okay? It's a waste of my time, and it's going to take a very long time if I go and read anything. If I go and let's have a look at another one. So again, biofuels are not an alternative, a green alternative, okay? This is a blog, so straight away I'm going, oh yeah, this is probably not a great source of information. But again, I can scan through. I'm not finding any data here. I'm really interested in biodiesel, so let's do, oh look, it's already in there from my last search, so I can hang on, it says, okay, this one has biodiesel, so it's got biodiesel. I've found a keyword in here, and then I can read that section and look at what there is in there that's related to biodiesel. Now, what often happens here is if we're in class, there's a student sitting there and they're like, but so I can't find any data on this topic. I think it's a rubbish topic. I can't find data. I need to change. And I come over and I go, okay, well, let's have a look. Let's go back to the Google search. Fossil fuels, biofuels, CO2 emissions. I haven't asked it a question, but I haven't even spelt it correctly, but that's okay. But there's nothing in here about biodiesel and diesel, if that's what I was looking for. But there's also nothing here to try and guide it to find data. It's just finding information. So let's try and fix up our search here. So let's go biodiesel. Let's go diesel, because that's what we're interested in, and CO2 emissions. And let's put data in there. Alright, now this is coming up with very similar searches in here, and again, some of these won't have data, some of them will, but a nice little tip here is to go and have a look at the images. Wow, look at all these graphs. So we've gone through it from, so there's no data about biodiesel and diesel, to having a hell of a lot of data here. Now, the trick here again is trying to scan through this data and have a look at for something that's relevant. So again, we're trying to find diesel versus biodiesel. We're going to want to see diesel and biodiesel somewhere in that data set, and we're trying to assess it based on CO2 emissions. So we really need to be seeing that it's got biodiesel, it has diesel, and it's got CO2 emissions. So as I scan through, diesel relative to diesel, so this is pretty good. I can't see CO2 on here, but I can see some other emissions on here if that's what I was interested in. I'm looking for CO2, so I could scan through CO2, diesel. These are likely different concentrations of biodiesel, engine speed. So this data is going to be about CO2 emissions from these different fuels and in different engines at different speeds. So this is a nice data set. Now, don't go and just take that data set from the Google image and use this URL as your reference, because this is just the Google search, okay? This isn't actually where this information is coming from. Google is just finding this image. So what I need to actually do is click on here and go to the website where it's come from, and this is the website that it has come from, and there's some information here. There's a figure legend if we need to work out a little bit more about what it is about, and more importantly, there's this source publication in this one. So this website has actually taken that data set from a different publication, and I could track that down and go and find it. So again, if you don't take the data set straight from the image search, go and actually have a look at the website and see where that has come from. So this is where that data set has come from, and this is the source, not the Google image source. Okay, so we've done our Google searches, we're finding some data. What I would be doing is I would have a Word document, or this is a OneNote page, so you could create a page in your OneNote, and I would keep track of what I was searching for. So this is one I prepared earlier, and I found this data set by Google image search, and then I went into that website, I screenshotted the title here so I know where it came from. I kept the link if I need to backtrack, and I would just start collecting some data sets. Okay, they obviously don't collect a lot and don't collect ones that you don't think are relevant, but go and collect the data set, keep track of it, screenshots, or use snipping tool to keep the title so you can backtrack and find it and do your referencing. Make sure you keep the URL so you can backtrack and look at how they did that particular experiment, and so that if I do want to use this data set, it's really easy for me to go back and find where I got it from, who wrote it, and any other information. Now, this particular data set, if my question was aimed at CO2 emissions, for example, and then I went and found this data set that is about fuel consumption, well, I think it's about fuel consumption. There's a bit of a typo there, but if I found this and I said, oh, look, this is a really good data set, and I really like this data set, fuel consumption relates to efficiency. So instead of doing enthalpy, I'm going to change my research question and have fuel consumption in there instead. That's completely fine. That's great. The thing that you want to be very careful about is that once you have your data set, if I'm comparing diesel and biodiesel and I'm assessing it based on fuel consumption, that's what my question is, or that's in and around where my question is. You want to be able to point at the data set. I can see diesel on here, I can see biodiesel on here, I can see fuel consumption. So I'm actually providing data that is answering my question. Okay, you want to have it really specific. So if this was comparing diesel and petrol, obviously it's not a great data set because it's not matching the question that I'm trying to answer. So last thing I want to leave you with, quick summary. So make sure your search terms include data, graph, table. That's going to make it a lot more efficient. So you're searching for the data, you're not searching for the topic. Google image searches can be very helpful to help you find data quickly. However, when you find that data in the Google image search, you need to actually go to the website because that's the source of the data, not the Google image search. Don't spend too much time reading when you're just looking for data. Skim through, look for tables, look for graphs, look for numbers. A really useful tip when you're doing any kind of research, even if it's not for data, is using Control F. So Control F, find the keyword, put in your keyword. That keyword will be highlighted throughout that source, and you can just hit enter and skip through those keywords and only read the bits that might be relevant to what you're interested in. Make sure you copy the URL and save it somewhere so you can backtrack. If you're evaluating that source and you've lost where the data came from, you basically have to find a new data set because you can't do that. If you find a nice data set that doesn't perfectly match your research question, consider changing your research question. Okay, that's completely valid. So hopefully that gives you a few tips on how to find data specifically, but also increase your efficiency of your research, because doing Google searches, you'll find a lot of information, but you're trying to hone in on specific stuff and you don't want to spend too much time just reading random information that you already know. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you out. Get out there, find some data, try and generate a nice specific research question.